Welcome back, y'all. I'm here tonight to do another sketching and sharing video. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're not new to the channel, welcome back. Either way, I hope you stick around for the entire video, and I do hope you enjoy it. That being said, let's get right into it. Tonight I wanted to talk about our ego, specifically ego when we first embark on a spiritual journey, when we're first getting ourselves comfortable with nurturing that inward spiritual connection. Now, in my experience, as I started this journey, my ego didn't want to be a participant. My ego put up every defense and had every reason and justification for why my spiritual pursuit was wrong. And the more comfortable I got with my inward reflection, and the more that I would seek that out to find my past traumas or my old ways of thinking that were hurting me, the more I worked in that inward connection, the more I realized that by going inward, I was cutting off the external attention source that the ego fed off of. Because the ego is a byproduct of our interpretation of the outside world, right? And the events that transpire and how people treat us. And then our ego creates its own portrayal of those events, creates our reactions to those things. But if we're focusing our energy inward, if we're focusing on that inner connection as opposed to what the external information is telling us, the ego starts to fall away. The ego doesn't have a space to thrive internally because we're looking at our feedback. We're looking at what we actually are holding within for that when we're reflecting on it. We're looking at our role. We're looking at why we were resentful or why we held something for too long, and what we need to do to make peace with that, what we need to do to heal that and release it, as opposed to focusing on all the external factors that helped create that situation, which is what the ego would do. Because then the ego would use all that external information to justify our resentment, our sadness, our fear. The more that I noticed that inward connection cut the ego off, the more I felt like my headspace, my internal space became free to feel and release the things that were needed to as they came up, because I was no longer defending myself against my ego. I was no longer retaining those things in an ego way, saying that they were necessary because that was the anger I would carry, or that would be the sadness that I would have to carry because I didn't deserve happiness. All the things our ego tells us. And the more that the ego took a back seat to the spiritual pursuit and the inward reflection, the more momentum I built into having a clear headspace to reflect into my heart space and allow for realizations to come up for the beautiful new ways I would see the world, even just moment by moment. Even the short, momentary realizations of something I suddenly felt I no longer had to carry anymore, or I was no longer sad about. Those moments were only granted to me because my ego was no longer fighting to keep me rooted in fear and to keep that change away from me. When we're new to a spiritual journey, that type of focus, our ego fears that spiritual connection, because that spiritual connection is an inward connection that the ego has no rule over. That spiritual connection trumps the ego in that situation. It has no power there. But when we're used to dealing in the ego mind and listening to those fears and those doubts and those dissuasive thoughts, it can be a troublesome start to a spiritual journey. But the more you pursue it, the more that you will find that the more you meditate and even just practice breath work to calm yourself down in moments of anxiety, they may not be significant breakthroughs every time, but the more that you put your focus into those things, into that meditation, that breath work, going for a walk in nature, refocusing inward and away from your ego, the more you'll realize your spiritual self becomes a regular part of who you are. And instead of having to fight your focus inward to remove it from the ego, that inward focus becomes first nature. And it becomes easier to live in that freedom. I hope that helped. I hope somebody needed to hear that. I wanted to keep the video short tonight. It's a little late. The kid's sleeping. If you enjoyed the video, leave me a comment and let me know. And thanks for watching anyways. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, hit the subscribe button so you can keep up with these. Again, thanks for watching, guys. Have a good night. I'll talk to you later.